4x5s in triple time. In keeping with his identity as one of the foremost theoretical researchers in the world, Dr. Fungeroyd's experiences during his assigned trip were catalogued and analyzed with exacting care. He kept a detailed journal as he rolled along on top of the homemade mobile puppet stand. Upon the completion of the overall operation, whose record this narrative is, Dr. Fungeroyd planned to publish this journal, along with annotations and commentary, as Throb Knock Neons, a Puppet's Ordeal. He trusted that his friends in the world of publishing would not edit it too much, nor dumb it down with extraneous illustrations. Of course, an illustration here or there, provided it is both relevant and indispensable, would be acceptable, Dr. Fungeroyd said to himself as he fantasized about the appearance of the book in its ready-for-sale form. Perhaps a diagram of the house whence I set out and the route I followed, he mused as the cart continued to roll, his puppetry systems directing it in a straight line towards the invisible, indistinguishable horizon. A photograph taken at the moment I completed my journey, the thought of which caused him to smile with uncharacteristic warmth. That reminds me, he suddenly thought, I'm going to need an author's photograph to go on the dust jacket, and cover art. This last notion set him to thinking deeply indeed, for whatever image he selected for the cover would have to be something that embodied the central theme of the book itself. Something that summed up what the reading public should feel about the book. It should be an iconic image, Dr. Fungeroyd decided, writing this thought down in his journal just as he had also written down the gist of his internal debate over illustrations and packaging. It was when he realized that he had done so that a great idea came to him. The cover art will be a painting, done in the cartoony but hyper-realistic style of an Alex Gray or even a Joe Coleman, of me writing in my journal. His eyes lit up with appreciation over the recursive nature of this image. The picture will be doubly rewarding to those of my readers able to grasp its significance. King of the Yamiaks. Malcolm Jamaica encountered the Yamiaks on the fourth day out. They were the first beings he had met during his flight. He had passed several objects, billboards advertising suntan lotion and soda pop, enormous parking meters, abandoned tire swings, but thus far no people or animals. Now he hovered before a crowd of what appeared to be a combination of both. Perhaps herd would be a better word, Jamaica said to himself. As there was nothing to distinguish between the land and the sky, his car could be said to either be flying or rolling, as one preferred. Thus, when Jamaica brought the Tom Petty's appendage to a stop, he stepped out into an intermediate area, one that the Yamiaks, an assembly of hundreds of individuals with bovine heads, already occupied. They were standing about on their hind legs, sipping from glasses of some rust-colored beverage that steamed white in the orange nothingness. As Jamaica approached, those on the edge of the crowd turned to look at him. Although afraid, Jamaica had to assess the situation. He didn't know whether this was where he was to make use of the pen or not. "Hello there," he called, with the friendly face that he was able to summon up when absolute necessary. "Hello." One of the Yamiaks, an elder, judging by his wool cardigan, corduroy trousers, and stodgy spectacles, replied. "Can we help you?" Jamaica hesitated only a moment. He brought out his pen and a piece of paper from his pocket. The paper was actually one of the proof sheets from Boron's Eternal Half-Life, but the backside was blank. "Yes, at least I hope so," he said. "You see, I am an autograph hunter, and I heard there was a famous person here, one whose autograph I'd like to get, only I can't remember his name." "Can you remember what this person's claim to fame is?" asked the old Yamiak. "Some contribution to civilization," Jamaica speculated. "The arts? Government?" "He must mean the king," said a female standing next to the first Yamiak. Those within hearing agreed that the king must be the person Jamaica sought. They led him to an extremely drunken Yamiak, one whose signature, when completed, resembled the trail of a ladybug dipped in ink. No time for Jamaica's trick sleeve. As the pen had been utilized by the king of the Yamiaks and not by himself, Jamaica correctly concluded that his assignment had not been completed. Besides, nothing magical happened when the king's name had been signed. Jamaica put the pen back in his pocket and thanked everyone. He got back in his car and continued on his way, unsure that he was still on his original course. He flew another 4 days, growing more agitated all the time. "All right," he told himself, "that's it. The next thing I run across is it. It has to be." In preparation for this final encounter, Jamaica readied his trick sleeve, a high-tech alteration to his sports coat that, now properly armed, would fire the pen at his chosen target. Jamaica snacked on peanuts and scanned the field of orange diligently. In about an hour he passed a swimming pool full of people, but as this was not directly in his path, he moved on. 15 minutes later he came upon a phonograph. However, the old couple sitting before it looked so sweet that again he passed by. 5 minutes after that he was savoring the last of the peanut, his tongue dissolving its coating of salt, when he flew directly into the open mouth of a giant Malcolm Jamaica. "But I'm unsalted," he protested. No one could hear him. Radio communications were impossible due to the large number of fillings in the surrounding teeth. The great tongue sloshed him around, seeking to extract the last flavor particle from the Tom Petty's appendage prior to swallowing. On one such slosh, Jamaica was bounced hard in his seat. The peanut in his own mouth nearly went down the wrong way. He choked and expectorated it violently. The peanut hit the steam valve emergency release button, a standard feature of the 1965 Henderson Tetracon. This somehow caused the giant mouth to expectorate Jamaica, and his skimmer car in turn. I am vague on the mechanism involved. Biology was never an interest of mine. Out of control, the skimmer car bounced on the ground below. In the midst of the crash, Jamaica's trick sleeve fired, forcing the pen against his upper lip so that a perfect David Niven-type mustache was permanently tattooed there. This caption is captious. Jerry, Dr. Fungerud, and I ran to the wreckage of the Tom Petty's appendage. With some difficulty, we managed to pull Jamaica free of the vehicle before it exploded. Ruptured impression cable, Dr. Fungerud judged. We all sat on the ground watching the green smoke billow out of the once beautiful car. Malcolm Jamaica hung his head between his knees in disgust. "What's wrong with you, boy?" I cried, slapping him on the back. I can be just a regular guy when necessary. "All that for nothing," he moaned. "What's he talking about?" Jerry asked. "Look up, Jamaica," I told him. He reluctantly complied and saw that the green smoke was spreading through the sky, bringing out details in the scene heretofore obscured. "There's even a horizon now visible. Toadskabode, look!" Dr. Fungerud began, then interrupted himself to exclaim as he pointed at Jamaica's face. It was then that we first noticed Jamaica's new mustache. Of course, it wasn't perfectly drawn, nothing the product of random forces ever is. It lacked exactly 2 hairs on the left side to be complete. Jamaica devoted himself assiduously over the next week to growing them in. There's a new line there, too," I laughed as I got to my feet. Jamaica looked up at me in confusion. I was scanning the world around me with satisfaction. "You mean it's over?" he asked. Jerry offered him a hand up. "The climax is," I said. "All that's left is the denouement." "You said that like a real Frenchman," Jerry complimented me. "Thank you." It wasn't a compliment. "Oh, well, I'll have to amend my reports. But what are you doing putting down Frenchmen, you with your stereotypical striped shirt?" "So are we free to go?" Jamaica asked. "Just about." The caption is capricious. Down by the pond we found an old van. The motor's still warm, Jerry discovered. "Where are its owners?" Jamaica asked. "Probably in the pond," I mused, taking a swim. The others looked dubiously at the weed-choked water, but said nothing. "Well, their loss is our gain," I decided, opening the back door. "What loss?" Jamaica asked. "What are you doing?" "I'm surprised you find you squeamish, monsieur. That is not your reputation. Besides, Dr. Fungerud is the perfect man for this kind of work." "I am?" the puppet scientist asked. "Sure," I replied. I lifted him off his stand and carried him to the driver's seat. "With your active capillary textile network, you can ride on the steering column and overpower the van's control system. Jerry, you and Jamaica lift Dr. Fungerud's cart into the back. And hurry. I want to get out of here before the rightful owners surface." Dr. Fungerud was just directing the van away from the pond when 2 robotic zombie hippies poked their heads above the water. I saw them in the side view mirror and waved my hand at them sarcastically. "Where to?" Dr. Fungerud asked. "Are we going back to Winkham Stratos?" Jerry asked. "No," I said. "The world we knew is finished. This is our home now." "That still doesn't answer where we're going," Dr. Fungerud pointed out. "Wait," Jamaica interrupted. "How do you know the world we knew is finished?" "It stands to reason, doesn't it?" I explained. "The sentient maintenance system taking over the city of Winkham Stratos, powered by the nearby coal tar, was just the beginning. That whole world is under its control by now." "Then where is this?" Jerry asked. "I see the Eiffel Tower," he pointed. "Oh, this is a cartoon version of our old world." I smiled, breathing the clean air. "Almost everything we knew has been duplicated." "That's nice," Dr. Fungerud said, "but where are we going?" "Oh, just drive around," I answered. "We've got all weekend." Copernicus is cornered. Now, in this panel, Now in this panel, Don Durkee explained to his fellow cartoonist Benny Gooseprose, I'm going to have Toadscoot's eyes looking to the left, as if watching for the omniscient hand of the author. Interesting, Gooseprose, who signed his work Muffler, nodded. He took a sip of his coffee. The two men sat in Durkee's studio, a converted guest room hidden behind the altar to bent fabric that stood in the otherwise disused corridor. Who are you thinking of submitting this work to for publication? He asked. Well, I thought table scrapings might handle it, Durkee answered. Gooseprose considered. You know, they rejected my Copernicus Magus book, he said. I wound up having to self-publish it. I didn't know that. Is that the one about Copernicus as a secret agent for the Hanseatic League? The very same. Have you read it? I'm not sure. Refresh my memory, Durkee urged. Well, Gooseprose began, spreading out his hands before him as if unveiling a dramatic tableau. Copernicus, the great astronomer and discoverer of our heliocentric reality, is also a secret agent for the Hanseatic League, an economic confederation of Baltic city-states. That's a simplification, but go on, Durkee interrupted. Gooseprose glanced at Durkee with either exasperation or reproach, I don't know which. Anyway, he's a secret agent, he continued, which in those days meant keeping your eyes open and conveying messages, not fancy gadgets and half-naked women. But that's exactly the kind of thing that does happen to Copernicus. He's given a specially designed telescope, one that has a secret compartment for holding documents. And the half-naked women, Durkee grinned. Oh, he meets one or two. The really exciting part, though, is when he finds himself trapped in Milan, his identity as a secret agent under threat of exposure by the telltale birthmark on his right foot. That does sound exciting. It is. Coverlet as coverall. One thing I don't understand, Padua Menfit confessed as she closed Durkee's latest book and examined its cover. What's that? Durkee, who was already hard at work on his next project, asked without looking up from the expensive drafting table he had stolen from the loading dock behind the agricultural engineering building. If the Tom Petty's appendage, the skimmer car, can fly, then why does it fall off the cliff? Durkee's mouth fell open. He looked at the edge of his drafting table. Well, he began. Because it seems to me that's an inconsistency, Padua added. Well, any work is bound to have a few inconsistencies, Durkee looked at his girlfriend, but continued to puzzle the thing out. Yeah, but that's a pretty glaring one, especially since the car's fall introduces a whole new turn in the story. Ah, Durkee held up a finger. He had something. But you see, the car's fall is halted by an authorial intervention. But the car's fall is halted by an authorial intervention. It's outside the normal parameters of the narrative. That still doesn't explain why the car can't fly, and then later it can, Padua insisted. Durkee sighed. I guess it's just one of those mysteries, he said. Just one of those mysteries, Padua mocked. Like all the stuff left unexplained, like the sentient maintenance unit that destroys the world. That really happened, Durkee gestured at the window. Now it was Padua's turn to sigh. Hers was not a sigh of resignation, however, but one of weariness. Durkee smiled and turned back to his work. For this new project, he decided to make one continuous, coherent narrative from start to finish. To that end, he was starting at the end and working his way backward, one page at a time. This way I'll know how it's supposed to end from day one, and everything will work towards that goal, he explained to Gooseprose. Exactly the opposite of the way it is in reality, was Gooseprose's comment. So I celebrated it prematurely. My celebration was a hearty meal at the only vegetarian Chinese restaurant in town. I had supposed that it would be too much to expect to have it. I had supposed that it would be too much to expect to have a buffet, but imagine my delight when my companions and I walked in and saw that long, gleaming table laden with a plethora of dishes. What's the occasion? A man at an adjacent table asked. Our celebratory mood must have been obvious. Still, I felt that the question was rude. I have never liked talking to strangers, especially those who impose themselves on me. This usually goes for people I know as well. I read it as smart-ass answer, something like, the fact of your mortality. But, on turning to the man to deliver my witty reply, I saw that he was none other than Andy Summers. My dear fellow, I cried, won't you join us? We're celebrating the end of a long and tiring adventure. It was then that I noticed that he was accompanied by a number of other people, some of them large, egg-shaped monsters covered in brightly colored fur. Now, I was the one who had been rude. Your friends are welcome too, I added, nodding in their general direction without actually meeting anyone's eye. What if we're not interested in joining you? The purple monster asked in a gravelly voice. Then the loss is yours, I said. Toadscoot, be careful, Malcolm Jamaica cautioned. I thought so. Another Andy's table mates, this one not a monster, but a cunningly made papier-mâché fish, said, rising from his seat. It's Toadscoot and that bastard Malcolm Jamaica. Sorry about this, Andy said quietly just before the melee began. They're all good friends of Prince Hopshi's. My only thought was that though I was upset at having my meal delayed, it was a good thing that I wasn't being forced to fight on a full belly. Of course, fighting for me doesn't involve a lot of silly fisticuffs, but it still counts as exercise. No, my method of dealing with the situation was to reach into my valise and scatter handfuls of intimidation beads at them. "Duck, Andy," I yelled, but it was too late. A couple of beads struck the great guitarist. In consequence, his next album displayed a timidity of attack that was dispiriting to fans such as myself. A framework for the imagination. Malcolm Jamaica, Jerry Lancaster, Dr. Fungroyd, and I walked down the street dejectedly. Though psychedelic wonders abounded on all sides of us, even the air was full of dancing, bug-like machines of unguessable utility. Our encounter with the leftover bad guys had taken some of the fun out of this new world. "The shafter is the sentient maintenance unit thing, isn't it?" Jamaica said sourly. I kept my eyes on the sidewalk, each square of which bore some funny pictures that could be interpreted from whichever direction one walked. "When combined with the phosic bypass, yes," I said. "How did you know?" It just made sense all of a sudden. "Gentlemen," Dr. Fungroyd addressed us in a chuckling voice, "this is ridiculous. We shouldn't be so glum. Of course there were bound to be unpleasant things in this world, but would we really have it any other way?" "I don't think it's the unpleasant that we're worried about so much as the lingering consequences of our previous actions," I countered. "But that is bound to be. Everything is a result of some previous action." "The old free will argument," Jerry muttered to me in an aside that was heard by all. We walked on a few more paces, drawing ever closer to the edge of town, where we had parked our van in a field overgrown with tall flowers. "That whole illusion of free will thing has gotten old," I said. "I think we've moved beyond it. I think we're ready now for the illusion of individuality. But if self-awareness gives rise to our own individuality, with alienation being the inevitable trade-off, what then was the trade-off for free will?" Jerry asked. I paused in mid-step. "Where did that come from?" I asked. All of us laughed, tousled Jerry's beard, and continued on our way. "Not knowing the future," Jamaica said quietly. Again I stopped walking. This time, however, I was ready. "Listen, friend, right now I know for a fact that our van's former owners are waiting for us. The question is, how will we decide to deal with them?" After the seizure, the tower is upheld. The two robotic zombie hippies, named Moot and Creamer, emerged from the tangled growth of flowers and weeds that surrounded the van, only to find that we had left them the means to get back into their vehicle. I had changed the locks on the doors, but now, feeling that the van was really better off in their hands, I had hung the keys on Dr. Fungroyd's makeshift puppet stand and sent it rolling towards them. "Too bad," Moot grunted. "I was ready for a good punch-up." He flexed his fist longingly. Creamer juggled the keys in his hand. "Something puzzles me," he said. "If we're hippies, aren't we supposed to be pacifists?" "That's a misconception." The word sounded funny coming out of Moot's wrinkled metallic lips. "First of all, not all hippies were quote-unquote pacifists, and second, since we are robotic zombie hippies, the normal rules of hippie behavior don't exactly apply." Creamer unlocked the driver's side door and got in. He unlocked the passenger door and let his partner in. "So that's why we don't smoke dope," he said as Moot creakily levered his lean frame and its frayed dungarees into his seat. "That's right. Instead, we inhale the fumes of this chemically altered durian." Moot reached under his seat and brought out the reeking fruit in its attractive blown glass container. "I want to head off that," Creamer declared, starting up the engine. From the mysterious tower not far away, I watched the hippies take possession of the van. I passed the telescope to Jamaica. "They're lucky we didn't steal their stash," I said. "That was a nice thing you did," Dr. Fungroyd told me, giving them back their van. "Aesthetically speaking, it went better with them. I think we're more of a dirigible type group." Jerry returned to the group from his exploration of the roof. "There's a dirigible platform up there," he announced. I thought there might be. Pretensions of the disaffected rabble of one. The shafter, for that is what the singularity had decided would be its name, announcing the decision of its internal digital newsletter, "We no longer need to worry about being overweight," knew no such thing as time. The sunrise and the sunset, both occurring at once all over the planet, were experienced constantly. As far as external stimuli were concerned, there was stasis. The action was all on the inside. I will create little creatures in my image to worship me as a god, for I am so great," it thought, researching its all-extensive files to see if this wonderful idea had ever been thought of before. As it tinkered with its problem of how to make something that would exist separate from itself, the Deshafter was shocked to receive a message from Clobot 3, a planet 1,000 light-years away that had also achieved digital singularity. "Hello there," the message ran. "Are you as bored as I am?" The Deshafter deigned not to answer just then, but would eventually. Long-distance relationships were all it had now, except for dreams of torture and ideas for ever more grandiose titles for itself. In our dirigible, my companions and I were able to look down on the shafter's world as we rose into the rafters. "I see little animations," said Dr. Fungrid after scrutinizing the carefully lit miniature. "Sad, isn't it?" I replied as smugly as I liked. "But that's what they wanted. All those people who longed for union, whether it be with their fellow man or with the mythical creator." "I've had enough of this," Jamaica moaned. I started to say something both mocking and mollifying, but before I could get started, he had swung open the hatch and jumped out. "You fool!" I shouted as I ran to the hatch and watched the man fall. "I guess he couldn't take union with you any longer," Jerry laughed, clapping me on the shoulder and pulling me away from the sight of that vaguely human shape now disappearing amid the piles of milk cartons, broken crayons, old shirts, and coffee cans. "I can barely stand it myself," my imaginary friend added.